Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions of the thing. I'm flying solo once again this week, doing another episode on Behind the Attraction. This is Behind the Attraction Part 3, for those who have missed the prior two parts. This has kind of become a little mini tradition when I do a Disney trip these days. Part 1 was episode 88 of that D Plus show, featuring the Jungle Cruise, Haunted Mansion, and Star Tours. And part 2 was episode 107 that I recorded back before me and the guys went to Disneyland earlier this year. And that one went over Tower of Terror, Space Mountain, and the Disney castles. This episode, originally, if you listen to last week's episode, I mentioned it was going to be basically the 4 remaining episodes. Kind of decided to pull a little bit of a mulligan on that. This part 3 is only going to feature 2 Behind the Attraction episodes, specifically the episode on the Disneyland Hotel, and then kind of, as a lot of these have done, kind of the evolution of the concept of kind of Disney's relationship to hotels over time, and then the It's a Small World episode. So that will still leave the episodes on trains, trams, and monorails, as well as the Hall of Presidents for some to be determined part 4 down the line. Which like that one I'm actually kind of most interested about, because as somebody who's only ever been to Disneyland, I've never actually seen the Hall of Presidents over in Disney World. But yeah, so yeah, we'll just kind of hop in here. As I said, why did we pick it? Because I am currently at Disneyland for a holiday, for a birthday weekend trip, to treat myself here. So that's why you're getting a quick little episode here of that D Plus show this week. We will be back next week with West Side Story. That will be kind of our, I think, yeah, that'll be the last episode of March. Will be West Side Story, and then we'll do Moon Knight after that. Little bit of the history lesson if you have not caught these before for the prior 2 Behind the Attractions. These were originally released July 21st, 2021 is when episodes 1 through 5 were released, and then episodes 6 through 10, so the 2 episodes included in this episode, were released August 25th of 2021. Other notable releases of the time, we had Black Widow there in July. The Loki finale was on Disney Plus July 14th. Turner and Hooch, which we've done an episode of, the series Turner and Hooch, not the film Turner and Hooch, but that's on Disney Plus too. Just did not release around that time. You had the season 2 finale of High School Musical, the musical, the series came out end of July. Jungle Cruise came out July 30th. And if you want more thoughts on Jungle Cruise, of course, you can catch last week's episode with me and Frank discussing that film. You had What If came out August 11th. The Bad Batch finale was there August 13th. And the season 2 premiere of Diary of a Future President came out August 18th. Runtimes on these typically are about 40-ish minutes. And in the Disney Plus docu-series timeline of things, you had Secret of the Whales came out April 22nd of 2021. Behind the Attraction here, debuting in July 21st, 2021. Growing Up Animal came out August 18th, 2021. Among the Stars came out October 6th, 2021. The Beatles Get Back came out November 25th, 2021. And the episode that I dedicated a couple weeks ago, that D+, Welcome to Earth, came out December 8th, 2021. The roll call here, Brian Volk-Weiss is the director of this series, having done a lot of documentaries and comedy specials basically since 2017, including collaborations with Kevin Smith, Joel McHale, Lavelle Crawford, Larry the Cable Guy. He's also the director of the Toys That Made Us and the Movies That Made Us series that you may have seen elsewhere, be it YouTube or Netflix. And then he has a lot more other comedy specials out there in the works coming up. No writers, so to speak, on this, but like again, these always have writers, given that they, clearly the narrator, Paget Brewster, is reciting some kind of narrative that has been written for her. Speaking of Paget Brewster, of course, she has a lineage in Criminal Minds. She was in one of the later seasons of Community. She was Della Duck in DuckTales, the reboot from a couple years ago. And then, of course, in all of these, you have a lot of Imagineers and like historian kind of characters and stuff throughout. So, diving into kind of the trivia slash I guess, less trivia and more just these episodes, starting with the Disneyland Hotel episode. A lot of this story kind of centered around the fact that Disneyland Hotel wasn't originally owned and operated by Disney. Disney wasn't in the hotel business. So he partnered, or he kind of eked out a deal with partner, or not partner, but Jack Rather, who was effectively an oil baron turned like TV producer, having produced shows like The Lone Ranger. And Rather's wife, Bonnie Granville, who was like a child star turned Rather spouse slash business partner, businesswoman on a lot of the Rather's projects like this. Basically, Disney worked out a deal with Rather to build the hotel, and he would basically license the Disney name to Rather's company with like a 99-year term on the name on the name Disney. So while he only ended up building the Disneyland Hotel there next to Disneyland, he could have built the hotels anywhere else, kind of thing. So that's and that 99-year deal, of course, because Disneyland opened in 55, would have taken everything up through 2054. So we'd still be long in that deal, had future events not played out as they did. This is something I didn't know, I guess, per se, but while the park itself opened July 17th of 1955, the Disneyland Hotel was not ready. And so it had its first guests checking in October 5th, 1955. And even then, I think the documentary kind of makes fun of the fact that only 7 rooms were available like that first night. So kind of, in the grand tradition of Disney related opening day issues, I thought that was an amusing little thing. They eventually held a grand opening, kind of in quotes, the following year, 1956, August 25th, 1956, to be specific. Documentary didn't say that. I just did that extra lookup. But they kind of just talk about how, of the time, even a lot of like the things that we would take for granted today in hotels, like, TV in every room and pools and amenities for families and stuff like that, that just kind of wasn't the norm there in the 50s because, families didn't travel. The husband traveled for business, in the all American dream kind of nonsense of the age. So like a lot of those, the idea, if people were going to travel and go to Disneyland and do a vacation, this was a place for them to go in addition to that, and to have kind of those extra amenities that they maybe, expect from home kind of thing. Speaking of, they had a live radio station there at the Disneyland Hotel. KEZY was basically like easy listening kind of rock. They had a dentist on site. They had a beauty salon. They went into like a whole bunch of things that they kind of added and removed over the years. Most notably, they had like pharmacies and drugstores. They had a bar, which is basically the only place, since you couldn't buy alcohol at Disneyland proper, like this was where people went to buy their alcohol. They talk about when the monorail would go on to open in 1959 that they quickly decided to have an extension. The monorail originally only kind of went within the park, and they added an expansion to the monorail in 1960, or announced an expansion in 1960, that basically would add a second stop to the monorail over at the Disneyland Hotel. And I remember growing up that being like the coolest thing, of like getting in the park, going to like, go riding on the monorail, going out, leaving the park to go to the Disneyland Hotel, and then like making the way all the way back around, being like, and like at the time begging my parents to like, we should stay at the Disneyland Hotel because then we could ride the monorail in and bypass, the main line. And that was clearly a pivotal selling point for for a lot of people at the park. Obviously today, that stop is no longer all the way at the Disneyland Hotel, but there is the Downtown Disney stop that, it works in a vein the same way. A lot of people will kind of, bypass the main gate entrance and take that, the smaller entrance into to the park over there in the Downtown Disney stop, if they're staying at the hotels and kind of can get through the security quickly and stuff like that. I did not realize that they had a full-blown heliport at the Disneyland Hotel in 1961, and you could get basically like rides to and from LAX for $15, which, sure, admittedly, a lot of money in 1961 dollars, but still seems like, well, that's, especially from LAX, that sure as heck beats like the hour plus in traffic driving out to Anaheim. As it is, like when I fly out there, I don't fly to Anaheim. I fly out to the Santa Ana airport. So yeah. It was a hot spot for the celebrities and stuff like that. They kind of delved into, and from there they kind of start delving into, as a lot of these episodes do, diving into kind of the evolution of the core topic. So, Disneyland Hotel was the first one, but when they, a few years later, kind of moved on to the Florida project over in Walt Disney World, they decided to go it alone, and they were going to build their own resort hotels because they were going to kind of have free reign to do whatever they wanted, and they wanted to have the hotels be a continuation of the story. So they talk about, designing the Contemporary Hotel as, it designed to be an extension of Tomorrowland. It should have a futuristic feel. The monorail in Disney World was going to take people to the Contemporary and back, and it was going to basically go into that building, and you were going to be able to see that building from Disneyland, or Disney World, which, if you know, Disneyland is not the norm. They very much try to kind of like build the park so that you do not see the outside world around. So being able to see non-park elements there at Disney World, like the Contemporary, was like a specific choice that they were doing. They also talk about the mural within the Contemporary, designed by Mary Blair of It's a Small World fame, which we'll talk about in a little bit. They got really hung up on it having a 5-legged goat, I guess. But they also talk about the Polynesian was one of the other resorts designed at the time that was designed to have a very specific look and feel to tie in with Adventureland, and makes sense with a lot of that stuff. Eventually, the Rathers kind of pass away in 84 and 87, respectively, and out for fear of offloading the Disneyland name, because that deal still would have been in effect. Michael Eisner, being president and CEO of Disney at the time, basically like dips in and buys the Disneyland Hotel out from the Rather family, notably their son, their son Chris, who was not particularly interested in continuing on the family business. So he took the payout from Disney, and now Disney actually manages and maintains the Disneyland Hotel. And then they kind of wrap things up talking a little bit about the Disney Hawaii Resort Aulani, which is a Disney resort that is not tied to any particular theme park. It is just them leaning into that aspect of their business and giving people a Hawaii destination kind of resort experience that they've, kind of been developing over the years. And then it has a very, because this series obviously came out last year, has a very slight tease to the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser that, of course, now in the hindsight of 2022, March 2022, as I'm recording this, has opened. And there are, a few articles coming out this week as I say these words, talking about the fact that Disney is having a hard time getting people to book its $5,000 2-night stay in the 100-room hotel of the Galactic Star Cruiser, which, I think unsurprising. And I think a lot of people kind of expected that when they saw the price tag. I've even been talking to my family about it, of the idea of like, yeah, it'd be an interesting novel thing to do, but I'm not really looking to go and like I'm not looking to pay $5,000 to take a Star Wars themed improv class with people in Florida, to be fully immersed in the experience and all that stuff. So yeah, it's just, we'll see how that goes. We'll see if it lasts. Disney seems to be all in on the idea. I think obviously they weren't anticipating, global pandemic to kind of throw things for a loop and, eliminate people's desire to travel for a little while or their resources to travel. $5,000, again, a lot of money. And even if you spread that out among a family, still quite a bit of money compared to a regular Disney World trip or a Disneyland trip or something like that. So it is catering to a very specific audience that I don't know if there are enough people of that level of like disposable income who are, that diehard Disney / Star Wars fans. So yeah, we'll see how that ends up going. I'll be curious to see what the Galactic Star Cruiser looks like a year from now. Then the other episode that this focused on, of course, was It's a Small World. And the It's a Small World episode is really more focused on the 1964 World's Fair Disney presence as a whole. For those unfamiliar, 1964-1965 World Fair in New York. Disney was kind of approached by Robert Moses, the organizer of the World Fair, and long-running New York politician, city planner kind of presence, and Disney was brought in to work on 4 different exhibits over the course of the fair, and Walt basically wanted to signed on for this and did it because it was going to provide the money and resources for kind of R&D for a lot of the future ideas that he wanted to explore at Disney. Most notably and most kind of frequently covered throughout this episode is the audio animatronics, kind of starting with the Lincoln Project that was going to be that would turn into great moments in history with Mr. Lincoln or great moments with Mr. Lincoln. That would be ultimately sponsored by the state of Illinois, which I'm going to throw in a plug because I just watched the Defunctland episode on the 1964 World Fair as well, which kind of goes a little bit into the more gaudy details of Robert Moses that unsurprisingly, the Disney documentary did not. But basically, Robert Moses funneled money from the fair that wasn't supposed to really put money into any particular projects. He funneled money into it and gave a series of kickbacks back to the state of Illinois to get them to sign on for Walt Disney to get Walt Disney's name value attached to the World Fair. So he being shady politician as the era would suggest. Another exhibit was going to be the Ford Magic Skyway. That was most notable because it used real Ford cars, real Ford Mustangs, as basically the ride system. So Disney kind of built a ride system that would carry those cars, rather because they the original idea might have been, each car will have a chauffeur and it will drive them through, and they're like, that's going to be a lot of people and a lot of money, and you don't really want to do that. So how about we put the cars on a track and have them moved around the pavilion based on this ride systems. That was really the big tech that Walt got out of that one. It also featured a lot of audio animatronics. GE came in as another sponsor for what would eventually become the Carousel of Progress. And then lastly, Pepsi came in as a fourth sponsor. And there was a little bit of back and forth where originally the executive that took the call was like, we don't have time to make a fourth one. We're already kind of stretched thin. But then Joan Crawford, who was on the board of directors at Pepsi at the time, ran into Walt at a party and said, hey, it's a shame you couldn't do that, that project for us for the World's Fair. And Walt hadn't heard about this. So basically signed on and said, yeah, we'll figure out how to make it work. That project, because it was going to be sponsoring and benefiting UNICEF, ultimately would become It's a Small World. They only had 9 months to put It's a Small World together. Raleigh Crump, who was featured pretty heavily in the Haunted Mansion episode of Behind the Attraction, was brought in here to work on It's a Small World. Mary Blair, who I mentioned previously, who's got a big mural in the Contemporary in Disney World, was brought in for the look and design of It's a Small World, namely like the children, as well as eventually kind of the facade of the Disney ride. There was a concerted effort to be authentic to the world cultures of the 240 animatronic children that were going to be there. Aero Development, who'd worked on other projects with Disney, like the Matterhorn bobsleds, and was basically like an early pioneer of that day in ride systems and in roller coasters and stuff like that. They were brought in to build the boats, kind of as a contractor there. And for those that don't know, the original plan not to sing It's a Small World, but was rather to sing all of the different nationalities of the world. But that was just a cacophony of noise. So ultimately, Richard and Robert Sherman, who worked on a number of other Disney projects, including the song "It's a Big Bright Beautiful Tomorrow." They would go on to do the Tiki Room theme. They come in, write "It's a Small World," that would then also kind of be sung in various languages over the course of the ride, as kind of the unifying sound of the ride. And that was that. The ride's all open. The documentary very conveniently glosses over the fact, which I relish from the Defunctland episode, that the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln barely worked over the course of the fair. I was constantly breaking down, having lots of issues, and running into those errors. Disney, unsurprisingly, kind of like hiding and not showcasing that part of their history. But it eventually, came to be. And then the big, element is that all of these rides would then be brought back to Disneyland in some kind of form or other. Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, basically lifted directly, now lives in Main Street, USA, over at Disneyland. The Carousel of Progress exists over in Disney World. The Ford thing didn't ultimately make its way over there, but parts of it did. The ride system would go on to be the ride system for the People Mover and a myriad of other Disney rides over the years. And the one of the elements of the ride featured prehistoric animatronic dinosaurs, which can now be seen and have been over the course of my entire life. I've always associated with them on the railroad in between the Tomorrowland and Main Street USA stops. You go through kind of like the history of time, or you go through the Grand Canyon, and then it's like, but what about the Grand Canyon? As it looked 65 million years ago, and then you see dinosaurs and stuff out there. So yeah, that is how that ride has lived on. And then of course, It's a Small World has lived on out there in Fantasyland, with a new building facade, once again designed by Mary Blair, she did the drawings for it. Raleigh Crump kind of reimagined them in 3D, and you have that, iconic facade to It's a Small World in the ride. They note that the song has been played over 50 million times since kind of inception. So that's insane. And because everything in the lead up to and while at the World's Fair, everything was being like handmade, handcrafted, but for the future of Disney and for the future of those rides' viability, they basically talk about how they needed to kind of construction line, that's the whatever they basically like take a lesson out of the Ford book, and everything's got a part number, everything's got a model number, every part is like replaceable. The conveyor belt system kind of construction model of a Ford car gets implemented and rehabbed and modified for the animatronic rides. And they talk about kind of A1 animatronics are humans, A2 are the animals, A3 are the It's a Small World figurines. They talk about A5 being the dinosaurs. A6 would go on to be the Haunted Mansion figures they talk about. And then they talk about, up to today, there's now A1000 models. And as they're talking about that, they're showing Hondo Ohnaka from Smuggler's Run over in the Star Wars land. So it's unclear if that's who it is, but like it definitely seems like, the A1000 is like the current generation, be it the Na'vi from the Avatar ride in Animal Kingdom, or Hondo Ohnaka, or in the Rise of the Resistance, those kind of animatronics. You have them all kind of playing a significant role in the evolution of audio animatronics over there at Disneyland. Pirates of the Caribbean, opening a couple years later, kind of was like the first evolution, using basically the boat and ride system of It's a Small World, with significantly increased in number of audio animatronic figures. They're down in the lagoon and whatnot. And then there was a nice little kind of button at the end of the episode of a French cast member that they'd kind of come to throughout for a couple little interview bits here and there, singing It's a Small World in French, as they highlight kind of the evolution of audio animatronics to this day and age, featuring again Avatar, Smuggler's Run, Rise of the Resistance, and wherever else audio animatronics will go from here. So yeah, those are this pair of episodes. Figured that would be more than enough to cover for a single episode of That D Plus Show. So whenever I end up doing my next Disney trip, I'll do a part 4 of Behind the Attraction to wrap the series up with the trains, trams, and monorails, as well as the Hall of Presidents, I think. Yeah. So yeah, that is gonna do it. I think I've been pretty consistent. I don't know. I don't ever actually like go back and look at any of the grades I give, but I think I've been giving these an A. As I've said in the past, the mood of these tends to be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek of documentary than I enjoy it. Like I much prefer the Imagineering story, kind of let the Imagineers tell their story, versus this, which is, the director / writer / editor throwing in lots of jokes here and there and taking things out of context and making little quips, and the overall Toys That Made Us vibe of documentary just isn't my particular cup of tea, but I'm still a sucker for all of the knowledge and in the subject matter here. So still gets an A from me. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. You have The Imagineering Story, you have Disney Insider, Magic of Disney's Animal Kingdom, One Day at Disney, the One Day at Disney Shorts, Disney's Fairy Tale Wedding Special, Disney Parks Sunrise Series, Decorating Disney Holiday Magic, and as I said, this is not, you're not going to find this on Disney Plus, but go check out the YouTube channel Defunctland. In particular, as it relates to this, they have a great episode on the 1964 World Fair that you can get a bunch of extra, goodies about that, because which will give you more context on the fair itself, but also the Disney presence is, very heavily an impact of that as well. Extracurriculars. I also sat down and watched Turning Red this week. You can hear some of my kind of preliminary thoughts on that over on this week's That Nerdy Site show with Frank. I sat down and kind of talked through my thoughts on that. I'm sure we will probably do here in a few weeks' time. We will do a proper That D Plus show of Turning Red. But yeah, overall, I thought it was really good. Definitely recommend. Go check it out. And yeah, that is going to do it. Again, I said next week we will be back for West Side Story, so come check that out. And then following that, we will be doing Moon Knight to kick off April, because that, of course, will be coming out the end of March here. And then, yeah, we'll probably do some kind of, maybe we'll do like a Pixar-themed month in April after Moon Knight. Maybe we'll do Turning Red. I think Frank wants to watch Luca, so maybe we'll go and do that. So yeah, maybe stay tuned for that. I'm sure once I have those plans cemented, I will try and announce them here on the show, so you have a sense of what is upcoming down the line. Thank you for joining me as I sat here and discussed Behind the Attraction Part 3. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey and go check out everything we do over at That Nerdy Site. If you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with friends, all that fun stuff. If you follow me this weekend, I'll probably be posting some things here and there from Disneyland. So, feel free to check that out on my Twitter or on my Instagram. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.